Well, good evening, friends, and welcome back. Cumberland Outdoorsman with yet another one of my 22 rimfire series videos. Today I'm going to be talking about scope parallax and how that relates to shooting a 22 rifle. But before I get started, let me take the opportunity to apologize for not posting any videos lately. I know it's been about 3 weeks or so now, but I've had a lot of things going on here at home. I just had a new roof put on my house. I've been doing some work around the backyard here and the side yard because I'm getting ready to pour a concrete slab here. But on top of that, my computer was on the fritz. The motherboard completely fried, so I had to have another computer, and I had to have all my files and programs transferred over to the new computer. And happy to say I'm back up and running once again. So parallax, what is parallax? Well, the best way I can describe it is when you're looking through a rifle scope and you're focusing in, assuming that the scope is focused for your eyes. If you're looking through the scope, you see the crosshairs, okay? And depending on what type of scope it is, along that focal plane, the parallax would be corrected, say for 150 yards for a centerfire rifle. If you move the target closer, say to 30 or 40 yards, if you're looking through that scope once again and it's in focus, and you move your head or your eye back and forth or up and down, you'll be able to see that that reticle is dancing up and down or oscillating back and forth. So to correct that, you have to be able to adjust the objective lens. Now I've got a scope here that's mounted on an air rifle. This is a Beeman R10 air rifle, and it has a parallax correctable scope. This one's set for 10 meters up to 100, okay? And depending on whatever distance you're shooting at, you can adjust the parallax here on the end. And what that does is it changes the focal plane at the objective side to correct that angle of parallax so that those crosshairs won't move back and forth. Everything stays nice and steady. You can do this if you have a centerfire rifle scope, for example, and you can set it up on something and then look at a target at a far distance, and if you move your head back and forth looking at the reticle, okay, you'll be able to see those crosshairs moving back and forth. And at close distance, say 25 or 30 yards, a lot of times that can be up to an inch or more. You know, and that's enough to miss a headshot on a squirrel. You know, if you have your eye not perfectly centered with the scope, say you're off to the left too far or off to the right, your actual aiming point will shift enough to cause a miss. And it'll cause your gun to actually shoot, you know, bigger groups. Now I found a way to actually correct that so that you can mount a scope like this on your 22. This is intended for a centerfire rifle, and the parallax is corrected for 150 yards, but we're going to correct it for 30, 40, or 50 yards, you know, for closer shots, because that's the kind of shots you're going to be taking when you're small game hunting for squirrels like I do. I've got a scope sitting here on top of my sandbags, and it's focused on a target down there at about 30 yards. And I'm going to show you how that reticle can actually move. I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but looking at it here with the naked eye, I can actually see that reticle moving back and forth, and moving probably that much. It's enough to actually cause the center of the reticle to shift completely off the target. And you know, unless you're absolutely looking through that scope perfectly the same way on each shot, then your groups are going to open up because you're not getting the same point of aim for every shot. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, here I've got a scope sitting on my sandbags. Let me see if I can get this camera lined up with the reticle. There you can see the target against the white background. And I'm not sure if it's going to be as pronounced with the camera. The camera lens is probably correcting some of that parallax. But I'm going to move it back and forth and up and down. I think you can see that that crosshair is shifting somewhat. It's much more pronounced looking at it with your eye. But either way, that needs to be corrected if you're intending to use this type of scope on your 22 rimfire. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, in order to be able to adjust this objective lens here on a scope that has no objective adjustment on it, you need to be able to loosen the adhesive that these lenses are mounted into, okay? I'm not talking about taking the lens completely out. We just want to be able to turn it to adjust it a little bit. So what I use is some acetone, and you have to be careful with acetone because it's a very harsh chemical. And what I just do is fill the bell here, the end of the bell, full of this acetone, enough to expose the rings inside here to that. Just like that. There you can see the acetone inside that bell of that scope. What we're going to do is set this aside and let it sit for about 10 minutes or so, and then it should be loose enough to be able to adjust. Here I've got a rifle that's got a scope on it that I corrected the parallax on. This is a 6-power Bushnell banner, okay? And I loosened the objective lens here. I removed the protective ring on the outside, and I was able to move that objective lens down a few turns and then refocus it here, and to be able to get the crosshairs in focus. And right now I've got it set where when I'm looking through the scope I can move my head one way or the other and that crosshair stays exactly where I've centered it to begin with. So let's take a few shots real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay folks, today we're going to be shooting some of this subsonic Ely hollow point because this is what I like to squirrel hunt with. And we'll get zoomed in here. I just shot a 5-shot group down there at 35 yards. And I got a group about the size of an aspirin tablet. Okay, I'm going to shoot another 5-shot group at that bottom target. Let's see where these go. Okay, that's another group that's just one ragged hole down there at 35 yards. Well friends, here I am the next day after the previous filming, and I went ahead and retrieved that target that I just shot at. There it is. These are both 5-shot groups at 36 yards. I went down there and paced it off, and as you can see, that's pretty impressive accuracy. And that's because this little rifle is now wearing a scope that is parallax corrected, okay? You should be able to get groups like that pretty regularly with a good solid platform like that bolt action. Here's that scope that I poured the acetone in, and as you can see now, this ring right here is adjustable. Okay, this is the lock ring, and I can turn it pretty easily. You can fashion a tool that'll fit inside there, and I've done that before out of a piece of flat, stiff steel, you know, that'll fit right into that slot so that you don't scratch your scope. But since this is adjustable now, I can actually turn it with my finger right there. It's so loose. There's no need in taking the lock ring all the way out because you can adjust the objective lens with a small screwdriver like this just by engaging the slot that's inside of the objective lens, or the ring that the objective lens is mounted to. And what I do is I turn it in a little ways and I check it. So we'll adjust this in just a little bit just by turning it. And then I'll refocus the scope to make sure my crosshair and the image is in focus. Most scopes have this adjustable lens here. That's a little too far. Let me back that off a tad. Alright, we're starting to get there. What I want to do is correct that parallax between 25 out to 50 or 60 yards and see if we can do away with that reticle floating as we change the way we look through the scope. You know, you don't want any kind of discernible movement of the reticle as your eye changes back and forth across the lens. Because if it's not corrected, you'll notice a shift in your point of aim, and that's something we need to do away with. Okay, we're just about there. That's pretty close right there. Now what you want to do is put your scope on something that doesn't move, you know, a sandbag rest or anything like that, and focus in on a target that you expect to be shooting at, and you want to move your eye back and forth inside that lens looking at that crosshair reticle. And if you see it shifting back and forth, you need to do some more adjusting. Okay folks, I got my scope adjusted. I had to go in about 2.5 turns with the objective lens. Now I'm trying to get this ocular lens focused perfectly, and what I'll do is look at a small tiny object down there at 35, 40 yards, like a blade of grass or something like that, and I try to get it in perfect focus. At the same time, keeping my crosshairs in perfect focus as well. I'm looking down there at something really small, like a dew droplet on a blade of grass, and when that comes into perfect focus, I'm in pretty good shape there. And then I'll zero in on that little tiny object and move my eye back and forth across the lens and up and down, and I don't see any movement of that crosshair. That means that my parallax is set for that distance. Now it's time to put this scope back on the rifle and get it zeroed in. Okay, before I put this scope back on the rifle, I want to clean all the lenses with an appropriate lens cleaner, and I like to use Zeiss tissues that are already impregnated with cleaner to get the best view and best image I possibly can, because there will be smudges on the lenses from my fingers where I adjusted the scope, and then we'll get it mounted and re-zeroed. But before I do that, I want to test this rifle here at a longer distance once I adjusted my parallax, and I'll be shooting at a squirrel target here. I've got one that I'm going to be setting out. This is a life-size squirrel target. We're going to be setting this up down there at 65 yards, and we'll see if we can't keep all the shots inside that target right there. So let me get it set up and we'll take a few shots at that distance. Okay guys, I got that life-size squirrel target set up down there at 65 yards, and I'm still shooting these Ely subsonic hollow points because this is what I intend to use when I go squirrel hunting. I want to make sure that this little rifle is well sighted in and that the parallax is correct even at that distance, because sometimes you're faced with longer shots like that. So I've got 5 of them loaded up in the magazine here, and I'll start to shoot that target here in just a moment. But before I do, I'm going to reposition the camera in the hopes that maybe you can see those bullets impact on target as I'm shooting. So let me get the camera reset here. Okay, I'm back an extra 15 yards from where I normally shoot. I normally test at 50 yards, but I wanted to make sure that this target was set up a little bit further out, because quite often, especially in the late season, I'm faced with longer shots like this. And I know I'm going to have to hold over just a little bit because this subsonic ammunition wants to drop about 1.5 inches or so at this distance. So we'll see where this first round goes, and then if I have to, I'll make an adjustment. So here we go. Like I say, I'm not really sure exactly where these are hitting. That was on a clean barrel, so let's try that one more time here. Okay. Usually after the second round, the gun gets leaded in from that clean barrel. I think that one hit fairly close to the middle. Got a little bit of a wind coming from the left. Well, my friends, I'm pretty well satisfied with this little bolt action Model 581 with this scope that I've parallax corrected at the distances where I expect to encounter game. 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 and beyond. And as you can see from the groups that I shot, this one here is at 35 yards, just like I showed you earlier. That's superb accuracy right there. I mean, that's hard to beat. And then I've got this target here that I set up at 65 yards. That's a 5-shot group. This is the first shot on a clean barrel. As I mentioned just before I shot it, I didn't know where the gun was hitting with a clean barrel, but I was holding about where my finger is, right there, where the tip of my finger is, and all 4 subsequent shots went right into the kill zone there on that life-size squirrel target. That's 3 shots right there, right next to the bullseye, or in the bullseye. And you know, you really can't get much better than that. I do need to do a little bit more experimenting with that rifle and that ammunition, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing here, folks. Now I've got another scope here that is of the same profile and the same power as what I've got on my rimfire here. This is a 6-power Bushnell banner, and here I've got another 6-power Bushnell banner. Same profile, same power, only this one has a bullet drop compensator here set for 100 to 500 yards. You can dial in the range and there's no holdover required. Now on this particular scope, I want to correct the parallax out to about 150 to 200 yards because I'm hoping to find another rifle. I'm on the search for a Remington Model 788, and the one I'm looking for is a 7mm 08. It's basically the same design as these 580 series rifles, and if I can find that, I'll be mounting this scope on that particular rifle because I'll have a matching setup here. Okay, I'll have a centerfire rifle that I use for deer hunting and a rimfire rifle that I use for small game. both of the same basic design. Now this little scope here that I corrected the parallax on is crystal clear, and there is no parallax error at the distances that I'm looking at here towards my 50-yard target. I'm back here at 65 yards and everything is crystal clear from that range right out here to about 15 to 20 yards. So I'm very well satisfied with this scope, and I'll be mounting this on my Marlin Model 39A. I think that if you're going to do this, you need to be careful when you use acetone, and do not break the seal on this objective lens. In most cases, if you have a pretty good quality scope, you know, these old Bushnells, if they're made in Japan, they're really high quality. Make sure you find one that's made in Japan, you know. They're top-notch, in my opinion. They're just as good as most of your high-end scopes. And as you can see from the targets I shot at, you know, that's the adjustment on there. You can see that's good quality, folks. I mean, it's just very well made. Everything's sealed and nitrogen filled. You don't want to release that nitrogen by breaking that seal on the end. So make sure you keep that objective lens inside the bell of the scope. Never adjust any further than you need to go to make sure that that seal is not broken. And you want to use all the O-rings and the lock rings back in place and lock everything down once you get it set. I know it can be a little tedious, but believe me, it'll pay off. If you have an older scope like this and you want to correct the parallax for your rimfire, then you know you can use a centerfire scope like this one here and have no problems whatsoever. You'll have a higher quality scope on your rimfire, and you'll be able to shoot more accurately with it. So after all of this adjusting and sighting in and shooting with a good platform like this Remington bolt-action rifle, you know, you have to admit that even though these are older scopes, these have been around for quite a few years, folks, the quality is top-notch, because after all the adjusting and fine-tuning and focusing, they still hold their point of aim and zero very well, just as good as any high-quality scope. And as I mentioned before, whether it's a Bushnell or a Tasco, don't let the name fool you. If they're made in Japan, back when they were made in Japan, they're excellent quality. They really are. I've had these old Bushnells on some of my deer rifles for decades, and they're still right on the money. And the fact that you can adjust them as I have in this video is a testimony to their quality. So with that being said, let me go ahead and close out this video and thank you for watching. I hope that you gained some useful information so that you can apply this to your rimfire if you choose to do so. But also remember, if you like to go hunting, fishing, camping, shooting, hiking, whatever your outdoor pursuit happens to be, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And also, hit that like button, smash that bell icon, and subscribe. That way you'll know when more videos like this one will be coming your way. So until next time, y'all take good care of yourselves and get out there and enjoy the great outdoors. I'll be seeing you.